Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Amay Bhatnagar, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about how to be a good public speaker. I'm going to share with you guys a couple of tips and tricks that I've learned, and basically just teach you those tricks. So, just to give you a brief introduction, I live in the United States of America, and I live in the city of Houston, which is in the state of Texas in the United States. I am 17 years old, so I am still in high school. And at my school, I'm very involved with my high school student government, as well as my school's speech and debate team. So I have given lots and lots of public speeches before, and so now it's time for me to just show you guys those tips and tricks that I've learned. So before we really go into the tips and the tricks that I'm going to share to you as to how to be a good public speaker, first we should answer a couple of questions. And the first question is, what is communication? Now, communication is that exchange of information between you or another person. It can be between you or another group of people. That's what communication is. And communication comes in all sorts of different formats. There is formal communication, there is non-formal communication, there is verbal communication, and then there is nonverbal communication as well. Verbal communication is what we are doing right now. I am speaking to you guys using my words, using my language, so this is verbal communication, what we are doing right now. Nonverbal communication is using your hands. It can be sign language, it can be body language. These are all different types of nonverbal communication. Now, formal communication and informal communication, these two things depend on the setting in which you are speaking in. For example, I'm speaking to you all through social media. So this is not formal at all. This is a not formal version of communication. But if we are to be at a conference or some sort of convention, that would be more of a formal type of communication. Or if you're giving a presentation in a class, if a teacher is giving a presentation to his or her students, these are all different types of formal communication. Now, the next question that we must ask ourselves is, why is it important to be a good public speaker? Public speaking, to me, is a way of organizing your ideas and presenting that to other people. If you are to give a presentation on your company, you're organizing the main points of your company and you're presenting it to other people. That is what public speaking is all about. So why is public speaking important? Public speaking is important because it helps you express your ideas. It helps you express yourself no matter what you are doing. And it really helps build your communication skills, no matter what realm you are in. The other reason why being a public speaker is very important is because no matter what field that you are in, you could be an engineer, you could be a doctor, you could be a teacher, you could be a student. Public speaking is something that you will have to face in your life. You cannot escape it. Students give presentations in class. Teachers teach in class. That's a perfect example of public speaking. They're speaking to the students on a daily basis and they're presenting information to the students. Coaches, they give instructions, they give motivational speeches to their players so that the players can play better. Employees of a company give presentations to their bosses or to the rest of the company. So no matter what field you are in, public speaking will be important to you. Another reason why public speaking is important is because it helps improve your knowledge. One thing that I have learned in the past couple of years that I've been in my speech and debate team is that the perfect way to learn something is to teach it first. Public speaking is exactly like that. It's an opportunity to teach people. Public speaking helps you improve your knowledge because the preparation that goes into making the speech and the preparation that goes into styling your speech so that you can present it to other people, these are all new things, new skills that you are learning. And for example, it is one thing to open your textbook and to read and understand the information. If you really want to understand the information to another level, you read the textbook, you understand the information, and then you teach that information. That's one way you can really build up on understanding the information that you are presenting. Public speaking also builds leadership, to be able to motivate people, to be able to inspire people. That's all public speaking because you're talking to people one on one, telling them what to do, trying to motivate them. That's all public speaking. And it also makes you different than other people by acquiring good public speaking skills. And the last reason that I'm going to be talking about for today, as to why public speaking is important, is because it helps persuade people no matter what you are presenting. If the audience really likes your idea, if they like the speech that you are giving, they will like the idea even more and they'll be drawn to the idea even more. So now let's go into the actual tips behind public speaking. The first tip that I can give, and this is a tip that almost anyone can tell you, no matter who it is. The first tip is to be very confident. We all get nervous in front of big crowds, especially if it's a big speech. We all get nervous. To this day, when I am in a debate room or if I'm giving a big public speech, I get nervous as well, right? Nerves tend to get the best of you as you are speaking. But if you're able to go up on the stage, be confident, you'll realize that the more you are speaking, the more that you are into the speech, the nerves and the nervousness tends to ease back. It tends to go away. So that's why it's very important to be confident, especially when you're speaking. Another thing is confidence has an impact on the audience as well. It makes your message stronger. It makes the information that you are presenting stronger. And it makes it more convincing and persuasive to the audience if you sound more confident, because then the audience isn't bored. The audience realizes that you know what you are talking about and they're more engaged. So you don't lose your audience at all. My second tip that I can give to you all is to stay away from filler words. Filler words are words that you tend to use often when you don't know what else to say. For example, is one word that we tend to use a lot, not only in speeches, but also in basically casual conversations that we have with our friends. Is one word that we tend to use a lot. It's one of the number one filler words. Another filler word that people use a lot is the word like. We use like at least 2 to 3 times in one sentence, and that's one fault that a lot of people have, is that they include the word like a lot in their speeches that they are giving. Now, why is it bad to have filler words in the speech that you are giving? It's bad because it adds an informal tone to the speech that you are giving. It gives the speech a sense of unprofessionalism. It's not professional at all if you add those filler words. But why do we add those filler words in the first place? For some people, it is a habit. People say those words out of habit. Some people, they say the word because since they're so nervous, they need a second to step back and think about what's next in the speech. So they say as a way to step back and think what's next in the speech. The perfect way to get rid of these filler words is actually quite simple. What you can do is you can record yourself while you are speaking, or you can gather a group of your closest friends and they can basically watch you speak, or you can stand in front of the mirror and watch yourself speak. These are all ways to show how your speaking style is. And I suggest that you do it in front of a group of friends, because then they can give you constructive criticism as to how to fix your speech. Recording yourself is also a very good option, because then you see yourself using those filler words and you try to fix them. One way to fix these filler words is to simply open up a dictionary or open up a thesaurus and find different words that you can use to replace those filler words. Don't pick a word that is too complex for you, because you don't want to mess up the word in the middle of your speech, because then that distracts the audience and you've lost the audience's attention. Now, filler words disrupt fluency in your speech, and it disrupts the attention that the audience has on your speech. It disrupts the presentation as a whole. So that's why filler words, you want to stay away from them as a whole. The third tip that I can give is to use hand gestures when you're speaking. If you guys have noticed, I've been using hand gestures a lot while I'm speaking to you all right now. The reason we use hand gestures is to help emphasize points. It's to help strengthen the message of the speech or the information that you are presenting. The minute that you start moving, the minute that you are trying to make a point, the audience will naturally be drawn to the movement, and they'll understand that you are presenting a point that is important to them. Another thing to note with using hand gestures is that, as I've stated before, hand gestures are a form of nonverbal communication. So it adds to the message that you are trying to give to the audience. Not only are you communicating in a verbal way using your words, but you are also communicating in a nonverbal way using your hand gestures. This is one way that you can really stick out to the audience. And this is one way that the audience sees that you are very passionate or very committed to the idea that you are trying to present. And also, it adds a point of professionalism to your speech. But even if you are in a non-professional setting, even if you are maybe just giving a small class presentation, hand gestures add to that presentation. They add to the value that you are trying to make as a whole. Now, one thing to be careful about, though, is people tend to over gesture when they're giving these speeches. They tend to use their hands a lot, and it can be very, very distracting for the audience and for viewers. So again, one way to really fix over gesturing, to make sure that you're not using your hands too much, is you can record yourself, or you can get a group of your closest friends to watch you while you speak, so they can give you constructive criticism on the hand gestures that you are using. Again, hand gestures are supposed to add to the presentation instead of distracting from the presentation. Now, let's move on to the fourth point, the fourth tip that I'm going to give you guys, and that is to know your audience and to understand your audience. For example, let's say that you are invited to a classroom to speak about the basics of the business field or the basics of the engineering field. This is a class of young students that are maybe in the third standard or the fourth standard. By presenting the information to these little kids, you're not going to use, very, very complex vocabulary like supply chain relations, or if you're doing an engineering presentation, you're not going to be talking about AC or DC motors and all of those things. You want to simplify your vocabulary for the children so they can understand the basics of what you are talking about. So this is why knowing your audience is very, very important. This goes back to the point that we were talking about before, formal and informal speaking. Knowing the setting in which you're speaking in is very important, because this is another factor that can be added to your speech. If you're in maybe a room of business executives and you're giving a presentation on a project that you are doing, you're not going to be using very casual or simplistic tone. You're going to be in a very formal tone, using vocabulary, using words that are very, very appropriate for the situation at hand. So by knowing your audience, you know the type of speech that you are going to give. And by knowing the type of speech you're going to give, that simply adds the emphasis, it adds to the confidence in which you're going to be speaking in as well. Another very important tip that I can give you all is to really understand your body language. Body language is very, very key when it comes to public speaking. For those of you who don't know what body language is basically non-verbal communication. If you're in an uncomfortable situation, you might be making maybe like a sullen face, or if you are talking to a person that you don't know, one tendency that we all have as humans is to simply cross our arms like this. This is a very common gesture that we tend to use. That is a sign of defensive body language. These are all examples of body language. Again, people get very, very nervous when speaking in these big crowds. And everyone does these little things while speaking that can show the audience that you are nervous. One common thing that I've noted that people do when they're nervous and while they're speaking is that they tend to put their hands behind their back, and then they tend to move side to side, or they tend to sway like this a lot. They do this a lot because it's a sign of them being nervous. That's what their body language is saying. And it's a habit for everyone. So again, another way to really fix this, to understand your body language, is to record yourself. Or when practicing your speech, you do it in the mirror. By recording yourself, you're able to go back and see what those little movements are. Because when we're nervous, we tend to ball up that nervousness. And the little movements that we do, they tend to come out as little nervous movements that tend to distract away from the speech. And if you're distracting the speech that you're giving, then you lose the attention of the audience. And again, that's something that we don't want to do. So by recording yourself while you're speaking, or by looking at yourself in a mirror while you're speaking, you'll be able to note what those little movements are. And then you're able to fix it every time that you practice that speech. My suggestion is that you record yourself. You speak in the mirror multiple times and try to improve yourself every time in terms of understanding your body language. If you are very nervous and if you need to maybe fidget with something or move something, then maybe put your hands behind your back so that you don't have to, do those random movements and show the audience that you are nervous. And plus, putting your hands behind your back is seen as a very maybe professional gesture as well. So those are all things that you can do to really understand your body language and make sure that you don't do those small hand gestures that can distract the audience while you are speaking. Another very key tip that I can give you guys is to use your voice. When we are nervous, we tend to speak very slowly. We tend to speak in one tone. We tend to be very monotone. Again, this all has to do with being nervous. These are all things that we tend to do when we are nervous. But if we are going to speak very softly, we lose the audience. If we speak in one tone or in one volume throughout the speech, we tend to lose the audience. That's being monotone. So the best thing to do is to be very strong with your voice and adjust the volume of your voice to the setting in which you are in. For example, this Facebook Live session that we are in right now, I'm not very, very loud. I'm not yelling into the mic. I'm keeping a very conversational volume, because that's the setting that I am in. I am presenting information to you in a very conversational manner. This is a lecture. So I'm not going to be sounding off my voice. I'm not going to be increasing my volume. But if this session were maybe at a convention center, or maybe if it was at a very big conference, then yes, I will increase the volume of my voice to make sure that everyone can hear me. Another thing that I know that I had mentioned before was tone, and what being monotone is to basically use the same volume in your voice throughout the speech. That's being monotone. And it can be very, very boring for the audience. They tend to lose their attention very quickly. So by using vocal variations on different words in your sentences that you are speaking, you keep the attention of that audience. For example, I don't know if you guys have noticed this while I'm speaking, but I tend to put a lot of emphasis on certain words while I'm speaking. I'm using those vocal variations so I can keep your attention as to what I'm saying. And it makes the information that I am saying, that I'm presenting to you, more persuasive. So by keeping one volume throughout the entire time, you lose the attention of the audience as a whole, and that's something that is not good, because again, if you lose the attention of your audience, you're losing the impact that you're trying to make with your speech. The last tip that I can talk to you all about is that when you're giving a speech, maybe if you're on a platform, or maybe if you were on a stage, moving is very important in terms of positioning yourself on the stage. This is all again in terms of presentation, how you're presenting your speech. Speaking is one thing, but body language and movement is another. Body language, hand gestures, and your movement on the platform as you are speaking are all very, very important things. Now, what do I mean when I say moving about on the platform? Okay. For instance, if we are on a stage, if I were on a stage and if I were to stay in one spot for the entire time, that tends to be very, very boring to audiences. And again, you don't want to have them be bored. You want to keep their attention. So by maybe going to a certain point in the stage while you are transitioning to another point, or maybe by walking back and forth on stage as you talk to the audience, these are all things that make the audience very engaged in what you are saying, because not only are you presenting your points in a verbal manner, but you are also presenting your points physically by moving from one point of the stage to the other to show that you are transitioning in your speech. And those transitions are very important, because then it helps organize the different points that you are talking about in your speech for the audience. Another quick tip that I can give to you all is, when you're giving your speeches, it could be maybe to just one person, or it could be to a crowd of 50 or 100 people. Eye contact is very, very important. When we speak, we tend to maybe wander off with our eyes. We tend to look off into different directions while we speak. But when we're giving public speeches, this is an indication of not being professional. By maintaining eye contact with the person or with the people that you are speaking with, you add that level of professionalism to the speech that you are giving. Eye contact is very important, because not only is that showing to the audience that you are committed to the speech, but it keeps the audience engaged in what you are saying. And studies show as well that by maintaining eye contact with a person while they're speaking, it shows that people are able to retain information even better, no matter what setting that they are in. So eye contact is something that is very, very important, because it keeps your audience engaged. It doesn't keep them bored, but also studies show that they'll be more engaged and more involved, and will be able to retain the information that you are telling to them. So now, just to sort of wrap up everything that we are talking about today, one central message that I want you all to take away from this session is that in public speaking, the audience's attention is very, very important because if the audience isn't paying attention, if they're bored, if they do not know the point that you are talking about, then your entire speech has gone to waste, basically. These different tips that I have taught you all today, they can make or break your speech in terms of getting the attention of the audience. One thing that I want you all to do is the next time that you are in a session or the next time that you are attending maybe a public lecture, I want you to pay attention to your audience etiquette. I want you to pay attention to how often you can lose you can lose your attention while you are in a session or while you are speaking, because then you will see from another point of view how fragile the audience attention can be. You can lose the attention of the audience in a minute, but also you can gain the attention back from the audience in a second. So again, the audience's attention is very fragile. So you want to make sure that you are doing all of these tips, all of these things correctly to maintain the attention of the audience and to make sure that they are engaged as well. Being confident, staying away from filler words like or like, using an appropriate amount of hand gestures, understanding who your audience is, understanding your body language, using your voice. These are all things that can help your public speaking in many, many ways. What it all comes down to is practice. You won't be able to implement all of these tricks. You won't be a master public speaker within one speech. It takes time. It takes time to really get those skills acquired to how your speaking style is. It takes time to figure out what your speaking style is. So it all comes down to how you practice your speaking. So again, this goes back to the point of maybe sitting down with your friends and having them critique you as to how you speak, recording yourself so that you can go back to the different points in your speech to see what mistakes that you have made. These are all things that can truly help you become a better speaker. Again and again, it comes down to the practice. So by taking constructive criticism, by looking at those little habits that you tend to have while being a while giving those speeches, these are all things that can really help you become a better public speaker. So I thank you all for joining this session today, and hopefully you guys were able to gain some very good knowledge out of this lecture. So again, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of the evening. Bye-bye.